nice summation by, the elder breaking down what Acts 15 is talking about. Since we're in Galatians, real quick, I just want to go back over verse 1, and then we're going to go back to Acts 15. Real quick, since we're in Galatians, I just want to go back over verse 1 real quick, all right? Just go back over that just to, expound a little further on what the brother was saying since he brought the scripture out. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherein Yahushua hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage." What did Yahushua make us free from? What did Yahushua make us free from? Not the law. Not the law. Because we got to keep the commandments. What? The penalties for breaking the laws. Because in the laws was also judgments for breaking the law. With every law, there was a judgment that accompanied the breaking of the law. So Christ freed us up from the judgments for breaking the law. But what the Pharisees were doing was they was trying to entangle the people in the Galatian church under the yoke of bondage, which means making them reliant on animal sacrifice. And if you under animal sacrifice, then there's certain sins that don't cover you. That's what this is going into. Verse 2, "Behold, I, Paul, say unto you that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing," because that's what the Pharisees boasted about. They boasted about the fact that they were circumcised on the 8th day and they were keeping all the laws. So therefore Christ didn't profit them nothing because they were sacrificing and all that, but there were certain sacrifices that don't cover us. Right? Reading on. "For I testify that again to you that every man that is circumcised is a debtor to the whole law." In other words, if you are relying on your circumcision alone, as far as you keeping the letter of the law, Christ don't profit you nothing. His sacrifice doesn't profit you nothing, because then you're a debtor to keep the whole law, which includes the judgments that go along with it. Right. When you don't have Christ. So this is what this is all going into. So that was a good point the brother brought out. Now let's go back to Acts chapter 15, and we're going to bring out some precepts. We're going to go through pretty much the whole chapter, and we're going to bring out some precepts, and you brothers can also add on precepts as well. So Acts chapter 15, verse 1, it says, "And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved." So as the brother brought out, which is the point, the argument is that if a man is not circumcised, he can't be saved. Now the question will be this, right? Let's bring it up to modern times. In ancient times, because we were in our kingdom, we were in our land, right? Circumcision was basically everywhere. You can go, you take your child to be circumcised the 8th day, it was everywhere. We are in captivity now. A lot of us don't have health insurance on our jobs, right? So now if you come into the truth and you don't have health insurance, right? And you find out that according to the law or custom, you need to be circumcised, you got to save up money to get circumcised because you don't have no health insurance coverage. So that saving up that money might take you 6 months. Then when you go to the doctor might put you on the waiting list for another 6 months before you can be circumcised. So you can't get circumcised for a whole year. And in the course of that year, you're learning the law, statutes, and commandments. You're keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, and God forbid you pass away before you could actually go and physically circumcise your flesh. So the Pharisees were teaching that if you weren't actually physically circumcised, you couldn't make it. What did Christ say? The brother just brought it out. Hold this and get Matthew chapter 19, verse 16. This is what Yahushua said. Yahushua never said that.
Dan, can I also add on just a little bit that this is the Pharisees that actually believed on Yahushua?
Right. These are Pharisees that were pretty much playing it off. They were what the scriptures refer to as false brethren. You had Pharisees that believed in Yahushua, and you also had Pharisees that were playing it off like they believed in Yahushua, but when the disciples' backs were turned, they were bringing in heresies. That's what we're reading about in the books of Galatians and Colossians and all these different letters that Paul were writing. You had people that were bringing in all types of heresies into those churches. That's what those letters were written for. Matthew 19, verse 16. Read that, Kazak.
Matthew 19, verse 16. "And behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?
Read on.
And he said unto him, Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is Yahweh. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments."
Right, so Yahushua said if you will enter into life, keep the commandments. That's the same thing that was being posed in Acts 15. The same thing. They were talking about how you being saved. The Pharisees said you had to be circumcised to be saved. Now Christ here in Matthew 19 is saying, if you will enter into life, keep the commandments. Read on.
Sorry about that. Verse 20. Let me Yeah, verse 20. No, excuse me, verse 19.
Verse 18.
Verse 18. And he said unto him, which Yahweh said, thou shalt do no more, excuse me, thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, honor thy mother, honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
Right. So the young man asked Yahushua, which commandments do I have to keep in order to enter into life? In other words, in order to be saved. And Yahushua ran down the list. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. What laws are these? These are the moral and civil laws. These are the laws that you have to keep in order to be saved. This is what Yahushua is saying. Circumcision is not listed amongst the ones that Christ said you need to do in order to be saved. Does everybody see that? Am I missing? Did I lose anybody? Everybody's good.
I got a precept. To echo what the elder was saying, the laws that Yahushua went over are very specific, and circumcision was not in them. If y'all still in Matthew, jump to 22, chapter 22, and verse 35. And this is the whole, basically you could boil everything down to this. Matthew chapter 22, verse 35. Then one of them, which is a Pharisee, when you read up a little bit more from 34, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, which what the elder was saying about you had some Pharisees who were fronting like they was with Christ, but they really wasn't. They were always trying to twist the man up, trying to see if they could trap him with his words. Right? Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Yahushua said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy power with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So that's what it boils down to. Because if circumcision was up there, Yahushua would have literally mentioned it. So that's the point.
Right. Your soul is on the line. Your salvation is on the line when you don't keep that moral and that civil law, which is the most important. It's how we deal with the Creator, the Most High, and how we deal with one another. That's how we are saved. Not based on the physical outer stuff. That comes later. The Most High wants this circumcised first. The mind has to be circumcised first, which when the mind is circumcised first, automatically you'll want to go and circumcise your flesh, because you'll read that that's part of the covenant, that's part of the commandments. It will come automatically. What the Pharisees were doing was they had it twisted. They wanted the external or the physical first, and the spiritual, moral laws would come later. That's not the way the Most High set it up. The Most High was all about the moral and civil law first. That is how we are saved. Since we're in Matthew's, right, let's jump down to Matthew 23. Same chapter. We're going to jump around a little bit. I'll read it. We're going to jump around a little bit. And the subject is Acts chapter 15. I'm just trying to show y'all something. Matthew's chapter 23. We're going to start from verse 1. Then spake Yahushua to the multitude and to the disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you, observe. What does that mean? Christ was telling, what was the Pharisees bidding the people to do? They were bidding the people to keep the commandments. So Christ said, all that they bid you to do, do it. Right? That observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. Right? For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move with one of their fingers. Let's jump down, right? Let's go right down to verse 23. Matthew's 23, verse 23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law. Does everybody see that? The weightier matters of the law. Now, was tithes a part of the law under the Old Covenant? Yes. But was it one of the weightier matters of the law? No. So what is this showing you? There are certain things that are in the law that are weightier or more important than other things. Circumcision is in the law. We must keep circumcision, but it is not one of the weightier matters of the law. The weightier matters of the law are the moral laws and the civil laws. That's the important stuff. That is how we are saved. But when we read in Acts 15, what was the Pharisees saying? The Pharisees were saying, except you be circumcised, which was not one of the weightier matters of the law, you cannot be saved. But Yahushua never taught that. Does everybody see that? Everybody with me? Okay. Verse 23 again. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, which were judgment, right? Mercy, faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Ye blind guides which strain at a gnat but swallow a camel, because they knew all the deepness of the law, but the little simple things like how we dealt with one another, dealing in righteous judgment, having faith, they didn't have none of that stuff. See? All right? Reading on, verse 25. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. Thou blind Pharisees, clean first that which is within the cup and the platter, that the outside may be clean also. Right? Verse 27. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye are like whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful on the outside, but are within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous, right, unto men, but within are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. So what is this showing you? That the Pharisees were always about the exterior, always about the show. They wore the best garments. They knew all the laws. They tithed the most. They were all circumcised on the 8th day, so forth and so on. They was able to do all those things, but the weightier matters of the commandments, they didn't do. This is what this is showing you. Does everybody see that?
All right. Take it back with you two. All right.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on the elders. So, brothers, let's go to Romans 9 and from 30 to 33. And it says, "What shall you say then? That the Gentile was followed not after righteousness, have attained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith. But Israel was followed after the law of righteousness, have not attained to the law of righteousness." Meaning they wasn't like they were keeping the law, but they wasn't doing anything through faith. They were just keeping the law. You know what I mean? And right here it says, "Therefore, because they ought it not by faith, but it was by the work of the law, for they stumbled at the stumbling stone, as it is written, Behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling block and a rock of offense, and whosoever believeth on him should not be ashamed." Because they wasn't following after Yahushua through faith. They were keeping the law, but they wasn't following Yahushua through faith, saying that he was going to be that sacrifice and a savior for the nation of Israel. They thought they could just keep the law, and the law was going to save them.
Wow, beautiful, right? So now let's go back to Acts chapter 15, because now we'll have a better understanding of what we're reading as we continue to read down and progress in the chapter. So now we understand what the argument was. So I'm going to read Acts chapter 15, verse 1 again. "And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren," who are these men? Pharisees, "and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved." Now we just read a whole bunch of precepts that showed that this doctrine that these men were teaching is false, because Yahushua never taught that. Yahushua never taught us that you had to be physically circumcised to be saved, although you should be physically circumcised. We deal with balance. That's the thing. We deal with balance. Everything deals with balance, but the Most High wants you to start from within, and what's within will eventually come to the carnal, what's without. That's how the Most High wants you to start. Verse 2. "When therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them," in other words, Paul and Barnabas had a big argument with these guys, right? "They determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain others of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and the elders about this matter." Because the apostles and the elders actually walked with Yahushua. They know what Yahushua taught. And we know what Yahushua taught. Yahushua never taught that, right? Verse 3. "And being brought on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenice and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles." These are Israelite foreigners, and as we read down, it's going to be explained that in this chapter as well. All right? "Declaring the conversion of the Gentiles and they caused great joy unto all the brethren. And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and the elders, and they declared all these things that God had done with them. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees, which believed, saying that it was needful, meaning it was a commandment, to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses perfectly. Verse 7. And when they had been much disputing, see, every time the Pharisees came on the scene, there was always an argument, because these guys was always coming to cause confusion. And when they had been much disputing, Peter rose up and said unto them, Men and brethren, ye know how that a good while ago Yahweh made choice amongst us that the Gentiles by my mouth should hear the words of the gospel and believe. And Yahweh, which knoweth the hearts, bear them witness, giving them the Holy Spirit, even as he did us, and put no difference between us and them, purifying their hearts. Now therefore, why tempt ye God to put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But we believe that through the faith of our Lord Yahushua we are saved, even as they. Then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Paul and Barnabas, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. Now, we're going to focus on verse 12. Then all the multitudes kept silent and gave audience to Paul and Barnabas, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. Who are these Gentiles? Who are these Gentiles?
Israelites in the world.
These are Israelites that are in a worldly state of mind. It's telling you that right there in verse 12. How do we know? How do you know? Verse 12 is telling you what you said. How do you know that? By looking at verse 12. The wording is telling you that. And I want a precept, and there's plenty of them.
I like a precept on Ephesians 2 and 11.
You know, when y'all come up with the mic, just stand close by. So you ain't got to, sit down and get back up. Yeah. Ephesians 2:11, read it. No.
Want me to read it?
No, we're going to read it. Yeah.
Right, it says
Now, you know I'm going to be a Christian on you, brother, so I hope this answers what I just asked.
the book of Ephesians chapter 2 verse 11 says, Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. Now I'm going to stop right there because it says, being in the time past Gentiles in the flesh, meaning Israelites when they in the world and not in the truth, they're considered Gentiles or heathens by those in the truth. Now how do we know that this is talking to the Israelites? We could go to Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, An apostle of Yahushua by the will of Yahweh to the saints which are at Ephesus. So when you read Psalms, I believe it's the 148th chapter, it says the saints are the children of Israel. So the first verse in the first chapter of Ephesians that you know is talking to the Israelites, the saints.
All right, looking at Acts chapter, that was good by the way, Looking at Acts chapter 15 verse 12, it says, Then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. Now the key, and I did a show on this, the key is where it says among the Gentiles. Does everybody see that? It doesn't say that Paul and Barnabas performed miracles to the Gentiles. It says among the Gentiles. Is that not what it says? Now I did a whole show on this, but real quick, to keep it brief, let's turn a couple of chapters over to Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21, we're going to read verses 19 to 21. Just to prove what I'm saying, that this was not them teaching the actual Gentiles, but these are Israelites. Acts chapter 19, we're going to read verses Acts chapter 21. We're going to read verses 19 to 21. All right? And it's just for the sake of review, real quick, since the brother Pawar is here, we're going over Acts the 15th chapter, because it's a stumbling block for Christians that try to use that chapter against us because they don't know the Bible. And it's also a stumbling block for Israelites that are of the persuasion of being what we call Old Testament Israelites, that read the books of Acts and Ephesians and Galatians and have no understanding, and also try to weaponize these scriptures against us. So I'm just going over this with the brothers. We're reading the Acts the 15th chapter. I'm just going to really briefly tell you brothers what we went over, and then we're going to get right back on to the point. When you read Acts chapter 15 verse 1, it says, "And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved." So a Christian will use this to tell you that, see, you need to be circumcised. You have to be circumcised in order to be saved. But when you read the book of Matthew, the 19th chapter, Yahushua never said that. Yahushua told us we must keep the commandments, and he gave us a list of which commandments will determine your salvation. And all those commandments that Yahushua mentioned were dealing with the moral and the civil law. Those were the most important commandments that your salvation was on the line if you did not keep. The circumcision will always come later. Once your mind is circumcised, and we learn how to serve the Creator, and we learn how to deal with our brothers, then all those exterior things, such as physical circumcision, the garments, growing your beard in, and all that other stuff that we are supposed to do that is in the law, will come later on. But that moral and that civil law is what hinges our salvation. So that's pretty much what we're going over. Now we're in verse 12. We'll read verse 12 again. It says, "Then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders Yahweh had wrought among the Gentiles." Now a Christian will read verse 12 and see that it says to the Gentiles, because they have Christian eyes. But we have Israelite eyes. We see that it does not say to the Gentiles, it says among the Gentiles. And that wording is important because when you go to Acts chapter 21 verse 19, it's going to explain to you that these are Israelites. Paul was not going and teaching the physical Gentiles, he was teaching Israelites. So we're going to go over real quick, we're going to hold Acts 15, and we're going to go to Acts chapter 21, and we're going to read verses 19 to 21 to get understanding. Right? I'm just going to read it because it's right a couple of books over. It says, "And when they had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God, Yahweh, had wrought among the Gentiles," same wording, "by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of the Jews there which believed, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles." Does everybody see that? All the Jews which are among the Gentiles. So who was Paul and Barnabas teaching? They were teaching the Jews that were among the Gentiles. So because it's not written the same way when we read Acts chapter 15, a Christian thinks that this is talking about the actual Gentiles. But we understand the Bible is understood precept upon precept, line upon line. So we're going to go to another chapter to show you that amongst the Gentiles, Paul was actually teaching Israelites, not physical Gentiles. Is everybody with me? Everybody's good?
Can I say something too?
Everybody
that was in the truth was always considered Jews. Everybody that was outside the truth was considered Gentiles.
Facts. That's right. That's correct. All right? So this is how we know when we're reading in the book of Acts the 15th chapter, when we see Gentiles there, we understand that these are talking about Israelites because we understand precepts. So we know to go a couple of chapters over, we're going to get the understanding that it's talking about Israelites amongst the Gentiles. So we're all clear on that. Yeah, come. Yeah, come closer and take the mic.
This is going more into the definition of the Gentiles, which are really Israelites. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. It says, "Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led." You know what I'm saying? So basically, these were Israelites that was just worshiping other idols. All right?
That's one of my favorite scriptures, right? You know why it's one of my favorite scriptures? We know that that's talking about Israelites for one reason, right? The Bible tells us in the book of Psalms that the gods of the other nations are idols. Everybody familiar with that scripture? The gods of the other nations are idols. So how are they carried away to idols when their gods are already idols? So the only people that can be carried away to idols is who? Israel. Because our God is not an idol. So it didn't have to tell you in 1 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, is talking about Israelites, but by what they call extrapolation. That's the word that we use, extrapolation. We know that that has to be talking about Israel because our God is the only God in existence that's not an idol. Has everybody got that? Okay, good. Let's go. Yeah, go ahead.
Like, when you told me that, right, I think we should try to get like straight to the point. So, real quick, everybody go to Romans. Let's go to Romans 2. It's the whole chapter, but when you read from 28 to 29, they kind of answer that. He said, "For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcised is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, who praise is not of men, but of the Most High."
That's it. So everybody understands? All right, so let's go back to Acts chapter 15. And let's continue. We're going to go to verse 13. "And after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon hath declared how Yahweh at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name." And we understand that these are Israelites. And a good precept to use for this particular verse is Isaiah, the 11th chapter, verse 10 on down. When the Most High speaks about the dispersed of Israel being taken from all nations from the four corners of the earth. There's many other great precepts, James 1:1, many other ones. But Isaiah 11 verse 10 on down is a great precept to use to show what this is talking about. All right? Now, moving on, verse 14 again. "Simeon hath declared how Yahweh at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophet, as it is written, After this I will return and build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. And I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Most High, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, which doeth these things." My question to Officer Hashipiel is, what prophet said that? Are you with us? Okay. We're going to read it again. Verse 17. Verse 16. Verse 15. "And to this agree the words of the prophet, as it is written, After this I will return and build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of men might seek after the Most High, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doeth these things." What prophet said that?
Brother, he has to.
I thought.
Oh, man. Okay, so who was it, Hashipiel?
Take your answer.
What's that? What was that?
Amos.
It was Amos. What if he's wrong though?
Then.
What's the precept with that?
Yeah. What if he's wrong? Don't take his answer because he said it. What if he's off?
I'm here to be edified.
Huh?
I'm here to be edified.
Okay. He's correct. It's the book of Amos. If anybody wants to get it.
Amos 9 and 8.
Amos, the 9th chapter, 8th verse. We read this all the time when we go to camp. Amos 9th chapter, 8th verse. And also this is good for another reason, right? This is another reason. This is another way. When you look at Acts the 15th chapter, verse 16, all the way to verse 16 and 17, this is also giving you another clue, right? As Paul and Barnabas and James are speaking, they're quoting Old Testament scriptures. Why is that important? The reason why it's important that they're quoting Old Testament scriptures is because when you go back and you look at what was written by the actual prophet that they were quoting, that prophet never said nothing about the physical Gentiles getting salvation. They never said that. So even though we're reading Gentile, Gentile, Gentile in Acts the 15th chapter, the fact that when they actually go into the scriptures, they're going back to the Old Testament, and when we check where they went in the Old Testament, it's talking about Israel and not the Gentiles. This is how we know the whole chapter is about Israel. This is how we know. All right?
And Salakia, it's Amos 9 and 11. In that day while I rise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will rise up the ruin, and I will build it as in the days of old.
Come on, so everybody's clear on that? Let's move on. I know it's hot down here, so we ain't gonna stay doing this too long, man. I'm hot. I gotta speak for myself. Verse
Your verse 18.
18. Known unto God all the works from the beginning of the world. Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to God. When it says amongst the Gentiles, who's it talking about?
Israelites.
Who's it talking about?
Israel.
Everybody sure? All right. So we've got a scripture in the book of Acts, the 21st chapter, to prove that, right? But from the very beginning, it was written the same way. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Get it real quick. From the very beginning, it was written the same way. The Most High prophesied we would be amongst the Gentiles. So if people understood how to link precepts, they would never get lost. But the problem is the majority of people don't know how to link precepts. Hold on. Okay. So Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. Let's get right to the point. Verse 64. This is one of the curses the Most High brought on us, right? And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people. Is that not what we read in Acts the 21st chapter? Is that not the same thing? Acts the 21st chapter, verse 19 to 21 said the Most High Israel was among the Gentiles, right? Now we're reading here back in Deuteronomy the 28th chapter when we first left Egypt. It was already prophesied that that's exactly what was going to happen. So when you're reading it in Acts, it's a fulfillment of what Moses spoke about all the way back here. The Most High cursed us if we didn't keep the commandments and said, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all the people from one end of the earth unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. All right? So we seen it in the Old Testament, and we seen it in the New Testament. So the Old Testament and the New Testament harmonize. They're in sync when you understand how to link precept upon precept. The reason why the Christians get lost, the reason why some Israelites that only believe in the Old Testament get lost, they don't understand how to link precepts. They understand how to do that when they read the Old Testament. But when they come to the New Testament, they start acting like Christians. They start breaking scriptures down like Christians. We don't do that. When we go to the scriptures, we link the precepts, and in all the Bible, in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Apocrypha, we're everywhere. You see what I'm saying? Let's continue. Verse 20. But that we write unto them that they should abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. Because these are things that when you first come out of the world, these are things that you can do from day one. From day one, you can abstain from worshiping idols. You must abstain from worshiping idols if you accept that the Most High God of Israel. It's a must from day one. Circumcision is not. So this is a yoke that the apostles did put on the new Israelite foreigners that were coming into the truth. They had to stop worshiping idols right away. They should abstain from fornication, which there's spiritual fornication, there's sexual fornication, there's many types of fornication. They should abstain from fornication. That is something you can do from day one. And also from blood, meaning you have to stop eating foods that have blood in it. You know? You can stop doing that from day one, right? Reading on. Verse 21. For Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. Verse 22. Then pleased it the apostles and the elders with the whole church to send chosen men of their company to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas, namely Judas, surnamed Barnabas, and Silas, chief men among the brethren. Verse 23, and they wrote letters by them after this manner. The apostles, the elders and the brethren send greetings unto the brethren which are of the Gentiles in Antioch, Syria, and Sicilia. Greetings unto the brethren which are among the Gentiles. So we went over the among the Gentiles part, but there's another key piece in there. It says brethren. So the apostles referred to these men as brethren. When you read Romans the 9th chapter, I believe it's verse 4, Paul said his brethren are who? Are Israelites. So we know that these are Israelites. So again, when you understand how to link precepts, this all makes sense. But to a Christian, none of this stuff makes sense. Verse 24. For as much as we have heard that certain which went out from us have troubled you with words, subverting your souls, saying you must be circumcised. In other words, they were saying that you must be circumcised to be saved. But we understand what? That circumcision of the flesh is something that comes later. But circumcision of the mind and the heart is what the Most High wants first. Okay? Again, verse 24. For as much as we have heard that certain which were sent out from us have troubled you with words, subverting your souls, saying, ye must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom we gave no such commandment. To whom we gave no such commandment. Why are the apostles saying that they gave no such commandment about if you're not circumcised, you can't be saved? Why are the apostles saying that they never gave that commandment? Officer Bunyan, what's up? You want me to ask the question again?
No, because he never told the Pharisees to teach that.
Who never told the Pharisees to teach that?
It's like, the apostles never sent.
The apostles said they never gave any commandments to anybody that said, if you're not circumcised, you can't be saved. Why did they say that?
Because
You want me to come back?
Yeah.
You want them? Why did they say that? Why did they say that? Why did they say that?
I'm gonna go back to Matthew 19:16.
Thank you. You don't have to go there. That's why.
You gotta work on the inward man first, and all that outward appearance and that physical stuff, you know, will come after. So
Right. Now, somebody, if everybody wants to get his fine, somebody get me Matthew, the last chapter of Matthew. Go to the very last book of Matthew, the last chapter of the book of Matthew. Real quick, this is a real quick precept. Matthew's 28 and 19 and 20. Matthew 28, 19 and 20. And then we're going to go back to Acts 15 and 24. It'll make more sense when we read Matthew's 28, 19 and 20. Kazak, when you get it, read it.
Matthew 28, verse 19 and 20. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world.
Y'all missed it, so we're going to go over it again. Salaki, y'all missed it. Read that again. I want y'all to pay attention because I'm going to ask you a question. Read that again.
Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world.
Great. Now let's go back to Matthew, Acts 15 and 24, and now let's ask the question again. I just gave you the answer. I want to see who picked it up. It's very subtle. What Captain Yawanathan said was right on point, but there's a little piece that we want to add into it to drive it home a little bit more. Because I just read in Matthew's 19, Christ commanded the disciples to go and teach all nations the things that he commanded them. Right? So now read Acts 15, and I'm going to read Acts chapter 15, verse 24 one more time. For as much as we have heard that certain which went out from us have troubled you with words, subverting your soul, saying ye must be circumcised and keep the law, to whom we gave no such commandment. How does that tie into what I just read in Matthew's 28, 19 and 20? How do the two tie together? In Matthew's 28, 19 and 20. How do the two tie together? If anybody wants to take it, feel free.
because you said, jump into verse 20, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I commanded you. And he didn't command circumcision and all those
Thank
different
you.
things.
That's the
Pharisees
answer.
was putting it on people.
Right. The reason why
And I was going to add on that, just like we brought out earlier, we had certain Pharisees that made believe that they were for Yahushua and the apostles. So whenever they sent the message, people looked at them like, oh, well, you represent Yahushua and the apostles. That's why Peter said, I gave no such commandments.
Right. To bring it home, the reason why Peter and the apostles said they never gave that commandment because Christ commanded them to teach what he taught them. Right? He commanded them to teach what he taught them. And we just read, as Jonathan said, we read Matthew 19, Christ never taught that in order to be saved, you had to be circumcised. So that's why the apostles came back and said, we never taught that. Why did they never teach that? Because Yahweh never taught that. That was a doctrine of men.
Yeah, I think it's very important that brothers read very carefully, because Yahweh shall always give the answer. If you read the letters in red,